Across the wide and lonesome prairie, the Oregon Trail Diary of Hattie Campbell, pages 53 to 60, written by Kristiana Gregory, read by Christina Grieve. Later, Aunt June wears a smock dress now on account she's getting bigger. I helped her and Ma do laundry. The stream was busy with ladies talking and working. By afternoon, the bushes were covered with petticoats, shirts, calico blankets, all drying in the hot sun. The youngest children ran naked into the water. Pepper and I loosened our braids and stripped down to our camisoles and jumped in too. How good the cold water felt pouring over my face and through my hair, and how good it felt to wash away all the dust. We swam downstream along the bank, where willows made a canopy of shade. It was shallow enough to sit on the sandy bottom, the water up to our shoulders. Ma didn't know this, but we then took off our drawers and camisoles until we were as bare as the day we were born. Reckless with joy, we dove below the surface to stare at each other through the bubbles. It was several minutes before we realized our clothes was floating downstream, far beyond our reach, down in the direction of the men and boys. Peppa and I soon learned it ain't easy to walk upstream, crouched down so only your head is above water. Also, it is near impossible to swim without your bare backside showing. We was rescued by two grandmothers holding blankets for us. There's dancing again tonight. Ma still refuses to join in. Pepper was fetched by Gideon, and this time he held her hand all the way through camp. Oh yes, a little baby girl was born this morning at Ash Hollow. Another thing, that fat lady came over and brung Ma fresh pie. Mince, it turns out. I hurried off to watch from the trees. She must eat 10 pies a day, I reckon. She's that huge. Next day. In the far distance, the prairie and low hills are black. I thought there must have been a fire, but Tall Joe said, nope, it's just buffalo, thousands and thousands of them. After supper, I sat by the fire to mend Benny's blanket. He lay next to me in the dirt, talking about this and that, and then suddenly he was fast asleep. I like the way he folds into my arms when I carry him to bed. Later, we are starting to find buffalo droppings, and Tall Joe says, where there's buffs, there's Injuns. Hunters leave the wagons every morning to look for game. They brung down 2 buffalo near enough to the trail so folks can see them being skinned and butchered. Jake went with some of the older boys to watch, but I stayed behind. Aunt June was resting in her wagon with Olive and Laurel, who are 3 and 4 years old. To make room inside, Uncle Tim pulled out several sacks of bacon and flour. It is just so much work to pack and unpack that at noon, Pa just lies flat in the dirt to rest, and he's sound asleep before his eyes even close. We're camped next door to Aunt June, with the tarp stretched between the tops for shade. I saw Mrs. Canker wave howdy. Hattie, dear, she said, may I borrow one of your mother's tablecloths, please? Mine is soiled, and Mr. Canker, he is ready for his lunch. I felt stiff toward her. I'm afraid not, Mrs. Canker. My aunt's voice came from the wagon. Hattie Campbell, we are not a family to refuse hospitality. Help Mrs. Canker take what she needs. Well, by the time Mrs. Canker had snooped around, we were quite a bit lighter. She took our lovely lace tablecloth that Grandmother made, 5 doilies, a tea cozy, and 1 English teacup. She also grabbed one of Ma's brown calico skirts and draped it over her arm, but I snatched it back. Our eyes locked, Then finally she turned away. "Thank you, dear," she called over her shoulder, her arms too full to wave. Jake was so excited to tell about the buffalo skinning, and he pulled my hand to go see, but I was bothered about Mrs. Canker and wouldn't. When Ma came back, I told her, but she said the same thing as Aunt June. We must share. This makes me mad. I like to share with nice folks, not those that takes advantage. I'm afraid if I say anything more about Mrs. Canker, I'll sound wretched. So that's all for now. Later, again, there are more and more buffalo. There are so many, the herds look like a dark stain moving over the hills. The droppings are flat, full of dried grass and make good coals, but it takes near a bushel to make a decent cooking fire. I would rather pick up twigs and logs than buffalo dung, but this is what we must do. As long as they're not fresh and gooey, it ain't so bad. The boys, including my naughty brother Jake, spend much of their chore time throwing these buffalo chips at each other, like a snowball fight, instead of helping. They also think it's fun to ambush us girls, but I just think it's nasty. Peppa and I feel nervous when we go out to gather chips. The other day, 2 horsemen were watching from the distance, so we told our fathers, who told the rest of the men. Now they all ride around with loaded guns. It scares me to think Indians are following us. But maybe Indian women are nice, but the men carry weapons, and I do not trust them. I walk alongside Wade's wagon with Peppa. She and I sing to him Yankee Doodle and other songs. We feel silly, but maybe he'll wake up. He's swallowing the broth she spoons into his mouth, and his arms no longer shake or stiffen. Mrs. Lewis and her friends look in on him constantly, and I will say he's the most prayed-over boy I have ever met. Evening. The sun is scorching hot. Ma insists I wear my bonnet to protect my face, but the cloth itches my scalp. When Peppa and I are out walking, we carry them like baskets to gather flowers. It feels cooler to let the wind blow my hair back. And besides, I think boys like looking at us better without 'em. The Mormons are still on the north side of the Platte. Sometimes all we see is their dust because they move faster. Ma says it's because they're traveling with just 2 children instead of 200, like we have in our train. Babies slow things up, and that's just the way it is, she says. I told Pa that Brigham Young must be very religious because he makes his people rest on the Sabbath, no traveling. Pa laughed, and he said, I still ain't in agreement with Brigham Young's theology, but if he wants to rest on the Sabbath, good for him. But Hattie, don't judge a man only by how strict he keeps his rules. Tall Joe said that up here soon the routes will meet at Fort Laramie, and like it or not, we'll be traveling alongside the Mormons in their 73 wagons. Peppa and I plan to meet the 2 children. Later. There is much celebration today and tears of joy. After 3 days of sleeping, Wade sat up and looked around and said, Mother, I'm as hungry as a bear. Just like that, Peppa and I joined hands with Gideon and the little Anderson girls and Jake and Benny, and we danced around Wade's wagon and sang. Mrs. Lewis just cries and cries. She is so thankful to God for healing her son. He is too weak to walk, but his father carried him down to the river's edge to a sandy beach. He bathed him there. He bathed him then, helped him dress into clean clothes. Now Wade's sitting in the shade wearing a blue shirt and pants. I'm so glad to see his beautiful green eyes again. Peppa just can't stop giggling. She's so happy. She sits by her brother just talking and talking to him. Another day. Clouds build up like white towers. Then in the afternoon they turn black. Near every day we hear the low rumblings of thunder, and we feel the heavy drops of rain, enough to settle the dust and coat the wheels with mud, but no downpour. We see mighty herds of buffalo in the distance, to either side of the trail. Often there are men on horseback moving along a ridge. If Indians are following us, they're keeping their distance. Maybe they're just curious and don't plan to murder us. This morning, I read back through this journal and laughed when I saw what I'd written about Boonville. I am afraid of only 4 things. Ma says that people who are thinkers often change their opinions. It means you're growing. So here's what I think. Some things I was afraid of, I'm not afraid of now, and the other way around. I'm not so scared about snakes anymore. I have not had a toothache, and the Indians haven't hurt us. Even Benny and Jake don't worry me so much. They are much stronger on their legs, and they stay close to the wagon. So here is my new list. I am afraid of hemlock. Fast rivers? That's all.